She's like a sickness in my brain, a vision standing by the window pane. She ripples through the blinds and leaves me in a daze. It's in the way her body moves me, the way she grabs me and intoxicates, until the signals in my mind forget to operate. In a fragile skull, I take my pleasure from my alcohol. She'll never give you any time at all. She just comes and goes, you know. And she's got me living in a chemical love, and I try to find the strength to know when she comes back to me again. I'm gonna come up from my hiding.
Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel and thank you for joining me for another coffee and crime time. And today we're discussing the case of 64-year-old Thomas Merriman, who was found dead under some garbage and cardboard boxes in the driveway of his home located at 144 Nardo Street in Solana Beach, California. Now, initially, Thomas's death was determined to be from a combination of lethal doses of prescription pills, strangulation, and suffocation. And within 2 days, an arrest had been made in his murder. Now, the arrest was of 37-year-old Jade Janks, who was not only Thomas's stepdaughter, but his next-door neighbor. And reportedly, the two had been extremely close since Thomas had married Jade's mother when she was just 14. Jade was 14. The mother was not 14. Thought I should clarify that because the way I said it was weird. But Jade was 14 when Thomas Merriman married her mother, and that is when he came into her life. So, what could have possibly turned Jade away from what seemed to be an incredibly tight and trusting relationship? What could have driven her to the point where she would commit murder of a person that she considered her father? That's what we're going to talk about today. And listen, this case is wild. It's kind of wild because Jade involved so many different people in her crime before, during, and after. And I mean, that's not the only reason it's wild, but I find it hard to understand how at any time she thought there was even a slim possibility that she would get away with murder, not to mention the extremely damning evidence found in Jade's electronic correspondence, her text messages, her Facebook messages, things like that. Now, Jade and her legal team claimed this was not a murder. She hadn't murdered Thomas Merriman. It was an unfortunate accident during which Tom Merriman, who'd been struggling with drug and alcohol abuse, had overdosed, and she just panicked. She didn't know what to do, so she hid him under some garbage in the driveway. But the prosecution would uncover a motive as well as plenty of supporting evidence that made the defense's theory of an accidental overdose very, very hard to buy. But before we dive into today's video, which I know coffees and crime times are usually a little shorter, this is probably going to be a longer one today because I didn't want to break it into two parts. I wanted to get it all out in one part, but there's just a lot to talk about. So before we dive into today's video, let's have a word from the sponsor of today's video, which is Surfshark VPN. Christmas is right around the corner, and not only do we want to save money whenever possible, wherever we can, but did you know there's also an uptick of internet scams and schemes during the holiday season? And that's why I'm here to tell you about Surfshark VPN. Surfshark VPN secures your data with industry-leading encryption and the most secure VPN protocols, and Surfshark also provides IP and DNS leak protection. And if all of those things don't make sense to you, because they didn't make sense to me, it basically means that nobody can figure out where you're connecting from. I also really love that unlike my internet service provider, Surfshark VPN has a strict no logs policy. They aren't watching and recording what you're doing on the internet because I think we're all grown-ups here. It's none of their business. It's none of anyone's business. So what can you do better on the internet with Surfshark VPN? Well, a lot. Besides increasing your internet safety, you can also overcome location price-based discrimination on travel expenses like plane tickets and rental cars. If you're traveling internationally, you can log into a server in your home country so your bank account doesn't lock you out or freeze your account for security purposes when they see that you're not in your normal place that they expect you to be. You can also feel safe on public Wi-Fi, which is something that's very difficult to say because Surfshark encrypts your data, makes it impossible to steal, and you can easily and quickly get around censorship and geo-blocking so that all the information you want is available, not just what they want you to see. But Surfshark VPN isn't just about practicality and protection. They can also open up a whole new world of entertainment for you because with Surfshark VPN, you can unlock 15 of the largest Netflix country libraries, including the US and Japan. All you have to do is connect to the server in that country and off you go. And at this time, Surfshark has reached the coverage of 100 countries. And they're the only VPN to do so at this point, which is pretty great. It gives you a lot of variety. Surfshark also has an app for every platform, whether it's PC, Mac, Linux, Android, iOS, smart TVs, Amazon Fire Stick, Apple TV, Chrome, Firefox, Xbox, and PlayStation. And here's the best part. One subscription allows you to install and run Surfshark on an unlimited number of devices at once. That means if you have young children and they're playing, the Xbox or PlayStation and they're using the internet, they may be compromised. It's really not safe. You don't know who they're talking to. You don't know who they're playing with. You can put Surfshark VPN on their consoles. You can put it on your computers, on your laptops, on your phones, your tablets, your partners' laptops, phones, tablets, your parents. Everybody that you care about can be protected with one subscription of Surfshark VPN. And listen, there's so much value in Surfshark VPN, and they think you'll agree as well, which is why they're going to give you a 30-day money-back guarantee. This is going to give you plenty of time to try it out risk-free. And right now, for a limited time, you can get an exclusive Surfshark VPN holiday season deal. All you have to do is go to surfshark.deals/stephanieharlowe to get up to 6 additional months of Surfshark VPN for free. Once again, that's surfshark.deals/stephanieharlowe. Use code stephanieharlowe to protect your online privacy today. Thank you so much to Surfshark VPN for sponsoring today's video, and let's dive in. Okay, so as always, to understand what happened at the end, we have to go back to the beginning. Jade Sasha Janks was born on October 14th, 1983 to her father, Steve Janks, and her mother, Jeanette Janks. Now, Jade's family, specifically her father, was involved in the construction business, and Jade would often go to work with her dad or just be on construction sites, and she said that because of this, she became interested in interior design while working and spending time with her father at these sites. Now, the marriage between Jade's parents, Steve and Jeanette, ended when Jade was just 3 months old, and Jeanette remarried in 1995 to a 39-year-old man named Thomas Merriman. From what I could find about Thomas, he had grown up in the Midwest. He'd worked as a landscaper and a cabinet maker in Colorado and in California. And in 2013, Thomas became the co-founder of the Ensenadas Butterfly Farms, which is a nonprofit organization that's focused on the conservation and study of native butterflies. Friend and business partner Pat Flanagan told NBC7 that Tom was an all-around good guy who loved being outside, he was very handy, and he really cared and gave a lot back to his community. And in this community, he was known and loved for his kindness and butterfly knowledge. Flanagan and Merriman had met in 2011 when they were both leasing some nursery space, and they became friends, they started talking, and they soon decided to combine their businesses. At first, they were selling palm trees. Then one night, these two men were drinking some beer by a campfire when they came up with the idea of selling the pollinator plants that attract butterflies. So they purchased a vivarium, which, if you didn't know, because I didn't, and I had to look it up, a vivarium is an enclosed area that can be used for raising animals or growing plants. And Flanagan and Merriman consulted with a man named David Marriott, who founded the Monarch Program, which is another nonprofit that tracked the migration of monarch butterflies. He ran his own vivarium in Ensenadas, and they basically wanted his knowledge and mentorship. So Marriott taught Tom and Pat how to build and maintain their vivarium, and in the spring of 2013, They opened Butterfly Farms, which moved to its present location at 441 Saxony Road in Encinitas in 2015. The half-acre property included a walk-through vivarium with live butterflies and a nursery that sold several pesticide-free varieties of butterfly-attracting plants, including native and tropical species of milkweed for monarchs. During butterfly season, which goes from April through November, Butterfly Farms can host a couple of hundred visitors each day, and many of these are groups of students from San Diego County schools. And more than 50,000 visitors would tour the Butterfly Farms exhibit each year at the San Diego County Fair. Now, according to Pat Flanagan, Thomas Merriman was in charge of the day-to-day operations, like the business side of things, but he was also Butterfly Farms' heart and soul. Pat Flanagan said, quote, "He was really good at patiently helping people. Our customers take a lot more time because they have a lot of questions, and he was always willing to take however long they needed to listen and make sure they had everything they needed to start their own butterfly gardens," end quote. Now, when butterfly season ended in November of 2020, Thomas Merriman made the decision to take a little time off and get laser eye surgery on December 1st. But in the days and weeks following this surgery, Tom confided in his friend and business partner, Pat Flanagan, that he'd suffered several falls, which had caused him some injuries like cracked ribs, 2 concussions, and facial contusions. And this caused Tom to need more time off from work. So he was supposed to come back after recovering from the laser eye surgery, but then he started falling. And I'm not sure if he attributed these falls to the laser eye surgery, because we're going to come to find that he may have been suffering from these falls for some other reasons, such as his alcohol and drug dependency. But either way, because of these falls, he had a bunch of injuries. I mean, broken, cracked ribs, nothing to mess with, very painful. There's not a lot you can do besides just wait for them to heal. And because of these injuries, he was unable to come back to work when he was supposed to come back to work. Now, when Jade Janks' mother married Thomas Merriman, Jade was just 11 years old. And she didn't even really meet Thomas Merriman until 3 years later, because for several years she lived with her biological father, Steve. But when she was 14, she started visiting her mother, Jeanette, and Thomas Merriman, who ended up having a son together named Cash, and Cash would become Jade's half-brother. Here's Jade talking about her early relationship with her stepfather.
Okay. And so what was, your relationship with him during that, let's say 14 to 18 year group?
In that time, we didn't have much of a relationship, really.
Why was that?
One is because Tom was working a lot, and he's kind of I don't want to say weird, but kind of a weird guy, socially awkward. So it's not like you're going to just have a casual conversation with him ever.
Okay. Did you think of him at that period of time as a stepfather or father figure to you?
At that time, not really. No. I mean, he would try to kind of take on that role, but no, not at that time.
I mean, you didn't have any issues with him?
No, there's no issues.
Okay. No, you didn't. You had no ill will toward him?
No.
Right.
There never seemed to be any issues between Jade and her stepfather, Thomas Merriman. They always had a close and loving relationship, and Thomas looked at Jade as his daughter, and she started to look at him as a father. And this bond became even tighter when Jade moved in with Tom and Cash when she was 18 years old. Jade did this to help Tom take care of her brother Cash because she asserts that her mother Jeanette had problems with drugs and alcohol, and that Jeanette suffered with mental health issues for years. A year after Jade moved in 2002, Thomas Merriman filed for divorce from his wife Jeanette. And in a court filing, he claimed that on Christmas Day, 2002, Jeanette threw all of Jade's belongings, including her clothes, toiletries, and paintings, off of the second floor balcony and into a parking lot. He said, quote, "She is increasingly violent and verbally abusive. She has been ransacking the house and is delusional." End quote. Merriman accused his wife Jeanette of abusing alcohol and even possibly meth. He said she had been smashing things, slamming doors, putting holes in the walls. She was sleeping all day and staying up all night. Merriman also said that his wife had lunged at him with a stun gun and that she kept a loaded shotgun in their house. In response, Jeanette Merriman said, quote, "I do suffer from depression. However, I am under the care of a therapist and a psychiatrist." End quote. Jeanette also alleged that she had caught her husband, Thomas Merriman, using meth in the garage, and that she had seen him in what she described as a compromising position with her daughter, Jade, who she also claimed was using heroin. So Jeanette claims that Thomas Merriman's using meth, Jade, her daughter, is abusing heroin, and she caught them in a compromising position together. Keep that in mind. Now, Jeanette said the reason that she had thrown Jade's belongings out of the house was because she had made it clear to her daughter that the only way Jade would be allowed to live in their home was if she remained sober. So when Jeanette found drug paraphernalia in her house, she threw the stuff out. Now here's Jade explaining a little bit about her mother's condition and what she perceived it was like to live with Jeanette.
At the age of 18, you're having contact with Mr. Merriman. What's your relationship like?
It was good. So my mom's got her issues, so that kind of brought us closer together, and that's when I'd say he took on more of a, I'd say sort of like a parental type role. You know, he would call me his daughter. I referred to him as my dad. So we became close.
So when you say your mom's issues brought you together, what do you mean by that?
My mom's she's had problems with drugs and alcohol over the years, as well as some mental health issues. So there were times she'd just go a little off the wall, so to speak, and kind of either against Tom or myself, or, you know, if she was yelling at Tom, I'd try to pick up my brother and get him away from it. And then eventually she actually ended up getting arrested. And when she was in jail, we basically, at that point, she was pretty bad. And we kind of, it's almost like we disappeared in the night. We cleared out the house and found a new place to rent. And then the three of us, being my stepdad, my brother, and I, all lived together for the next number of years.
I want to address something Jade said at the end of that clip, but first I want to tell you that it really didn't seem that Jeanette, Jade's mother, was the only one having struggles with substance abuse, with, legal issues, etc., because both Jade and Tom Merriman had their own run-ins with the law. Jade herself had been arrested more than once for possession of drugs and stolen goods, and in 2007, she was charged with possessing stolen IDs of more than 10 people. Apparently, these IDs were stolen by her during multiple instances of burglary, so I'm not sure if she's going into people's houses and robbing them, or if she's stealing their bags, their wallets, etc., but during the course of multiple robberies, Jade stocked up these 10 IDs that she stole and kept for most likely nefarious purposes, right? A loaded silver .25 caliber Derringer was also reportedly found in Jade's possession at the time of one of her arrests. As far as Thomas Merriman, right before he married Jeanette, he was accused of rape in 1994. Merriman was found not guilty of 4 charges of felony rape, but he was found guilty of the lesser offense of battery, and he had to serve 90 days in jail. So as you heard Jade mention briefly during her testimony, things with her mother Jeanette got so bad that one night she, Tom Merriman, and her half-brother Cash, they packed up their belongings, they moved out. And for the next 5 years, the three of them lived together, and Jade helped Tom raise her half-brother Cash. But at the age of 23, Jade decided it was time to move out and get her own place because she felt that the relationship between herself and her stepfather had gotten a bit too close, and that he was becoming very much dependent on her.
I moved into my own place. I kind of just had to get away from them a little bit.
Why was that?
So, with Tom, I think the more I was there to help, the more reliant he got on me and the less he would take care of himself. And it just got to be too much. All of a sudden I'm 18 and I have this 4-year-old that I'm helping raise. Everything was a lot. And so if it wasn't, just making appointments for him, he wanted me to like help do his like work stuff for him, and then his laundry, and they're just, he became, I don't know how to say, he was more and more reliant on me, to where it was just, I said, yeah, too much. I mean, and not only that, he started to try to pit me against my father. He was always trying to like badmouth him and tell him, if anything bad happened in my childhood, he'd constantly remind me about it. And it just got to be a little bit too manipulative. I needed some space.
Okay. So you move into your own place at about 23 years of age?
Yeah, I should also mention, at the time my mom was also fighting pretty hard for custody, and when she got custody of my brother back, or it was kind of, they were still fighting it out. It's around that time too.
Okay. And do you want to live somewhere else? Where'd you go?
I moved to like Point Loma area.
Okay. And so did you maintain, while you're away from the home, did you maintain contact with Mr. Merriman?
Ish. It kind of turned into, like holidays, a couple times a year maybe. And then sometimes during my brother's birthday, he's November, my birthday's October, and then there's Christmas. Like around that time, we'd always do a dinner. And then they still kind of counted on me to provide Thanksgiving for them. Yeah.
Okay. And so how long of a time period did this kind of relationship take place after moving out?
It just kind of started to fizzle. I was just trying to think back. He would try to stay in contact, and then I think like the more I wasn't able to help him. I mean, you get angry, but so I'd say maybe by like age 25, I was like, we were pretty much like, we were very close. I mean, we had this tight little family, and then we just kind of weren't anymore.
Okay.
After moving out, Jade started her own interior design firm out of Solana Beach, California, and she was, doing her own thing. She was a young 20-something, starting a business that, was pretty successful. She was going out with friends, and she was having less and less contact with Thomas Merriman. Now, Jade said there was never a big fight or a breaking point for them. It was never as if they'd had a falling out, and that's why they stopped talking, but she was busy. She was trying to focus on herself and her career. She was trying to allow Tom to sort of learn how to take care of himself, but every so often she and Tom would still talk on the phone, and they would see each other on holidays and Cash's birthday. However, in 2020, Tom Merriman moved to 144 Nardo Street in Solana Beach, and in April of that same year, Jade also moved to Nardo Street, right next door to Tom. Jade said that when she and Tom reconnected, she noticed that he didn't appear to be doing very well. He seemed to be aging rapidly. He seemed to be very sad and alone. That was right when COVID hit. He was by himself. We were all pretty much by ourselves, but if you didn't have a family or kids or a partner, COVID hit pretty hard when you had to sit in the house by yourself, completely alone, for months and months and months. And so Jade felt sympathy. She felt bad. And she fell back into the role of being Thomas's caretaker, stating in court that she did this because she and her stepfather had always had a special bond.
There's always been a really special bond. I don't think I've ever gotten along with anybody as well. I don't think I've ever trusted anybody as much. Or being able to just be as, I'd say, open and vulnerable.
You see anything in his conduct with you that concerns you at all?
No, it's a little bit confusing to explain. So Tom, well, not inappropriate with me. I've trusted him more than anybody. I've been comfortable, but there's always something kind of skeezy.
From the way Jade describes the relationship between herself and Thomas Merriman, it was very warm, very close and trusting. And she did look at him as her father, at least according to her. She said, quote, "I've always been a caretaker for Mr. Merriman. Anytime something would go wrong, if he hurt himself, I'd go get bandages. If he was sick, I'd go get soup. If he needed a ride to the doctor, I took him." End quote. She even said that Tom would often text her and tell her that no one would ever love her as much as he did, which is weird, kind of. I mean, I guess the sentiment is like nice, but it always creeps me out when people say that like no one will ever love you as much as I do. Or, like, what are you saying? What are you saying? Like, how do you know that no one will ever love me as much as you do? Like, am I only lovable to a certain extent and that's how you know no one will ever love me as much as you do? Or is this a manipulation tactic to make me think that if I didn't have you, I would never have love? Like, I don't really like it when people say that, but apparently that is what Tom said to her. Now, was it in the context of, you are my daughter and no one's ever going to be good enough for you because I think you're amazing and no one's going to love you as much as I do, in the way that a parent would say to a child? Because I could get that. Like, I could say to my kids, no one's ever going to love you as much as I do, and know that for 100% fact. Or was it something else? Was it something else? We're going to discuss that. According to other neighbors, Tom and Jade were always together during this 2020 period, which, like I said, the world was in COVID lockdown. The pair would often be seen outside walking their dogs. Jade made dinner for Tom every night. They spent a lot of time together. Anything he needed, she was there for him. But remember that Tom had gotten laser eye surgery on December 1st. And then he told his friend Patrick that after the surgery, he was constantly falling and hurting himself. In December of 2020, Jade went on a trip with a friend of hers, Adam Sipliak, to Cabo San Lucas. Apparently they were there to see Adam's son, who was competing in some martial arts thing. But either way, the relationship between Jade Janks and Adam Sipliak is a convoluted and complicated one, which we're going to get into more detail about later on. So while Jade was on vacation with Adam Sipliak, she got a call from Thomas Merriman, and he told her he had fallen. He then sent her pictures of bloody tissues and towels, which apparently the pictures also included a whiskey bottle. Now, during the trial, Jade would testify that she saw her stepfather drink whiskey regularly. She saw him drunk regularly. And he also took a number of prescription medications, including sleeping pills, a bunch of stuff like anxiety medication, pain medication, stuff like that. Jade said that she had seen Thomas Merriman intoxicated on more than one occasion when he would visit her at her house, and he was so drunk and even possibly messed up on pills that she would figure out shortly into the interaction there was no possibility of even having a conversation with him. She couldn't even understand a thing he was saying. So she would gently and nicely tell him, go home, sober up, and come back over when you can speak words that make sense to me. That doesn't sound very nice that I said it that way, but apparently she didn't say it that way. She said it in a nicer way. She said, go home and come back when you're sober. Which reminds me of that Evanescence song, Call Me When You're Sober. I have not thought about that song in so long. It just popped into my head, and now it will never leave me for the next decade at least. So in December of 2020, when Thomas Merriman told Jade he'd hurt himself and sent her the pictures of the proof that he'd fallen and he was bleeding and he'd hurt himself, she asked him, hey, do you need me to come home? And he said no. But Jade did eventually come home from Mexico, and on December 15th, Tom fell and hurt himself again, and this time Jade was home, and she was able to come over and help him, and she called the paramedics who transferred Thomas Merriman to Scripps Hospital, where he was treated for broken ribs, as well as a heart issue, which he wore a pacemaker for, and Tom's got a bunch of health issues, right? Because while he's at Scripps getting treated for the injuries from the fall, he also started receiving treatment for alcohol dependency, which had caused issues with his liver. He had a very low functioning liver. And then on December 23rd, once he was done at Scripps Hospital, Thomas Merriman was transferred to Aviara Healthcare Center, which is like an extended care, like physical therapy, nursing facility kind of thing. And here, Thomas started receiving physical therapy, and he was also continuing treatment for his heart and blood pressure and liver issues. Now, Tom called Jade to let her know that this was all happening. And she told him, listen, don't worry about it. Like, just get better. If you need something, call me. I'll pick you up when they discharge you. And while you're away, I'm going to go over to your house and clean it up. So it's going to be all nice and clean and ready for you when you return. So this is December 23rd, the day before Christmas Eve, and Jade did go and do this the morning of December 23rd. And while she was picking up and dusting in Tom's office, which I think was like his bedroom/office, but anyways, it was the room his computer was in. While she was in there dusting off his desk, she claims she accidentally nudged the computer mouse, And this caused the desktop to pop up. And when Jade saw what the desktop background picture was, she was shocked and disgusted. And an intense sense of betrayal immediately set in.
When I went to clean in his office area, I was kind of wiping things down, and I bumped the mouse on his desktop computer, and it shook the screen awake. And I looked, and there's a picture of female breasts on the screen, and I look, and I have a beauty mark on my chest, and I look at it, those are my breasts, so.
So let me stop you right there.
Throughout her testimony today, she needed a couple breaks to compose herself. She testified she found more than 100 nude photos of herself on her stepdad, Thomas Merriman's computer, and that he had actually cropped some of the photos of her and divided them up into different folders based on her different body parts. She testified the photos date back to when she was as young as 16 years old. As she says, the pictures had been on her laptop and on a digital camera in private folders that she never thought he would have access to. Now, her defense attorney repeatedly asked her, did you ever show photos like this to Merriman? Did you ever tell him about these photos? She kept saying, no, he was my dad.
It was the most violating, just awful, gut-wrenching feeling ever. I felt sick. I felt I couldn't even touch my own skin. I don't even know if there's words. I mean, not even in a movie have I seen something so just sick.
Now, the jury was handed a packet of what appeared to be thumbnails of some of those photos. They kind of handed them one to the other. One juror, a female juror, kind of shook her head, briefly looked at it, and passed it on to the next juror. So clearly a defining moment in this case right now.
Jade said that these pictures of herself, these naked pictures of herself, let's call them what they are, they're naked pictures of Jade, that she found on Thomas Merriman's computer ranged from a span of when she was about 16 or 17 until she was 25 or 26. They were older photos she'd taken with previous partners. There was a photo of her in the shower smiling, and she remembered one of her ex-boyfriends had taken. There were other partners she had been with who had taken other pictures. But there were other photos that had been cropped and then put into folders with names like JD Shower and JD Snatch. What do you think D stands for? Because her name's Jade Janks, but maybe JD is Jade, like Jade. I don't know. Either way, Jade claimed when she was on trial and the prosecution was like, how did your stepfather, Thomas Merriman, get these pictures? Did you give them to him? She was like, no. They were like, did you ever send him any pictures like this? She said, absolutely not. He was my father. I would never do this. She says she didn't make the folders. She didn't send the pictures, but an SD card and a digital camera of hers had gone missing some months back. And that was probably where these pictures had been. And then she realized that Thomas Merriman had stolen the SD card and the camera and then uploaded all of these pictures of her to his computer and put them in, neatly organized folders of specifically what parts of her body basically were being highlighted and cropped, which is super weird. Like, what I'm going to say about Jade Janks in this video, do not take it away from the empathy and sympathy that I feel for her if this is truly the way that things went down, because, oof, I can't even imagine. That's very rough. It's rough to find on anybody's computer, much less the man that kind of raised you. I guess he didn't raise her, but she didn't live with him until she was 18. But still, she thought of him as a father. That is a big, huge boundary cross. It's a huge betrayal. So Jade said that when she realized the reality of what she discovered on the computer, she was terrified because she knew that Thomas Merriman was going to be discharged from Aviara any day. And he would come home and find out that she knew about his stash of pictures. I don't know how he would find out, right? She never kind of explains how he would find out that she knew about the pictures. But during her trial, she said, quote, "I was scared. I mean, when I first saw the photos, I couldn't even use the bathroom. I just felt so disgusted. I couldn't shower either. I was just scared. I was scared of being, nude and vulnerable. And I just wanted somebody to just look out for me and make sure that, I was safe," end quote. And according to Jade, because she was so scared and just sick to her stomach and just afraid of being nude and vulnerable while she was alone, this is why she reached out to a man named Alan Roach, who she knew through Sam, who was a mutual friend of hers and Alan Roach. So Jade had never met Alan Roach before, had never talked to him before, but she just knew of him through Sam. But before Jade reached out to Alan Roach, she called a friend of hers named Mike, and she told Mike what she had found. Mike told her, delete the pictures, get them off the computer, wipe that computer clean. But Jade didn't do that because she was afraid of what would happen when Tom came home and found out she had erased the photos, which that makes sense. If Tom came home from the hospital and saw that all the photos were gone, then he would know you found them. But you could have just factory reset the computer and been like, oh, I accidentally did it. I don't know how. What do I do? But why would you erase the pictures? They're evidence that this dude was doing something very, very creepy that you can confront him with, you can confront him with this evidence. Or if you just didn't want him to have the pictures and you wanted to cut ties with him, erase the pictures, factory reset that computer. I don't care what he loses because he deserves it, and move on with your life. Don't talk to him anymore. But either way, Jade was torn about what to do on December 23rd. Jade also called one of her friends, Sarah, who gave her some advice. Sarah suggested that Jade should let the landlord know. I guess Jade and Thomas Merriman shared the same landlord. Sarah even said, you should call the police. But Jade didn't do this either. She said she was afraid of making Thomas Merriman mad. And that's when she remembered this guy that her friend Sam had told her about. And this guy was Alan Roach. And Alan Roach worked in private security. But throughout the trial, the prosecution would refer to Alan Roach as a fixer because Sam had told Jade that if she ever needed help with anything, Alan Roach was the guy to help her. And so on the morning of December 23rd, Jade sent Alan Roach a Facebook message. At 10:40 a.m., Jade sent a message to Alan Roach saying, quote, "Alan, Sam's friend?" End quote. Roach responded, quote, "Is there something I can do for you?" End quote. And Jade responded, quote, "Not sure, maybe meet for lunch, best to chat in person, awkward situation, not sure how to handle. Sam said if I ever needed help, to contact you." End quote. And Alan Roach responded, quote, "If Sam referred, I'm sure I can fix it for you." End quote. And it was most likely this statement that triggered the prosecution to start referring to Alan Roach as a fixer.
They switch over to text messages. And the defendant writes this: "He always said that if I ever needed help to call you, like actual help. Or if he got himself stuck in a pickle to call you. But more if hit the fan and I needed help or discretion." That's exactly what she needed. The evidence will show that the defendant began plotting Tom's demise on December 23rd, 2020. Premeditated, willful, and deliberate. She again emphasizes, I hate texting. She wants to speak in person. And she tells Mr. Roach, the situation is one I'm not sure how to handle. It's quite personal. She also says, again, I'd like to chat with you in person. The evidence will show she's trying to be careful about her text messages. The evidence will show that on December 24th, they arranged to have a meeting, and he goes over there. And she sends this text message saying, "Thanks for meeting me. I'm looking forward to hearing your shots and having a bodyguard so I can shout." And the reason she said that is because the photos that she found on Tom's computer were some of her in the shower. It wasn't a secret camera or anything. She's with her partner at the time. These are old photos of her, and she's in the shower. The evidence is going to show that she's having a visceral reaction. She can't even adjust to go in the shower because she's so disturbed by what she found on Tom's computer. So she hired Mr. Roach to just stand guard and give her that peace of mind so she could finally shower. That's how disturbed to the core she was about finding these naked photos of her, that she needed someone to stand guard while she showered. She also described how scared she was that Tom Merriman was going to be discharged early, or that he was going to escape discharge from against medical advice and come home early. And she sent this text message on Christmas Day to Alan Roach saying, I've been sleeping with a tarp on the floor and have a knife and iron rod by the bed, just in case it's the worst case scenario. She's talking about Tom coming home. She's afraid to be alone. She lives alone. And she sends a photo on the left of how she laid out the tarp. The purpose of it is if for some reason Tom came home and was going to sneak into her apartment, it would make a lot of noise and he wouldn't see it. And she would have the knife beside her. The photograph at the top right is the tarp that was found during the search warrant, and the knife on the bottom right is the knife that was found on the nightstand. This is indicative of her fear of Tom coming home early. Again, December 27th, she reaches out to Mr. Roach. Everything else is best spoken in person. I'm beyond freaked out, so freaked out. Still, 4 days later, after the discovery of the photos, she says she's having this visceral reaction. She's even vomited a few times outside, just going in there and thinking about these photographs. And she says to Mr. Roach, this isn't something I can take care of on my own. I'm really trying to hold it together. I'm losing it and spinning.
So this is the prosecution's opening statement, and it seems as if the attorney here is making a good case to show just how scared Jade Janks was during the days following the discovery of the pictures. She's scared and anxious. She's sick to her stomach, just dreading the moment that the hospital is going to call and tell her that her stepfather, Thomas Merriman, is ready to be discharged, picked up, and brought home. And Jade will say that she didn't contact Alan Roach to help her kill Thomas Merriman. She wanted him there as a bodyguard for protection so he could stand outside the bathroom while she showered. And I mean, I guess he did work for personal security, but clearly this Alan Roach guy thought he was something of like a mafiosa kind of thing. Like he thought he was, something more than that. You can tell from the interactions they're going to have that we're going to talk about. He thought he was more than just a personal security guard. And it boggles my mind because these pictures of Jade were not taken of her by some hidden camera inside her house. They weren't even taken of her by some hidden camera inside of Thomas Merriman's house. They were taken by her or of her by a partner that she was with at the time. And Thomas Merriman just got his hands on them. So why she would say she didn't feel safe to go over to her own home and shower by herself while Thomas Merriman was like in a hospital miles and miles away. And she felt more safe to have some strange man she'd never met before come over and stand outside the bathroom door while she showered. Because according to Jade, that's why she contacted Alan Roach. She wanted him to stand outside the door while she showered. And maybe that was part of it. But it's hard to believe. It's just hard to believe. On December 26th, Jade heard from Thomas Merriman's doctors that he was getting better. And she was also aware that Merriman's insurance was going to run out at the end of the year. So he was basically going to be discharged when that happened one way or the other. And she didn't have much time. She texted Alan Roach saying, quote, "Hopefully we can figure out a plan because I imagine you're too busy to watch me shower every day." End quote. On December 28th, she texted Alan Roach that now was the time to come up with a plan because they were running out of time. And then 2 days later, on December 30th, Jade texted, quote, "I think it's time to tighten up a plan." End quote. So she's talking about a plan in these texts, multiple texts where she refers to a plan. And in the aftermath of Thomas Merriman's death, Jade would be expected to answer for and explain these texts where she's talking about a plan. And she claimed, allegedly, that the plan was for her to pick Thomas Merriman up from the rehab facility and bring him home where Alan Roach would be waiting. She and Alan would confront Merriman about the pictures, make him erase them all, and then tell him to move out. But the prosecution believes that this was not Jade's plan. The prosecution believes that it was Jade's plan the entire time to kill Thomas Merriman, and this is going to be based on basically 71 pages of text messages exchanged between Jade and others, including Alan Roach. On December 30th, Jade sent a text to her friend, Mike Liebhand, and the text said, quote, "I still struggle with moral issues, yet I will never not be looking over my shoulder, so I made the call." End quote. Mike asked her, as anybody else would, "What exactly do you mean by that, you made the call?" And Jade responded, quote, "It means everything you think it means," end quote. At 5:27 p.m. that night, Jade texted Alan Roach, telling him her mind was spinning, but she had a plan. Alan responded that he needed to have a clear mind now that the time was near, and he wrote, quote, "There is no room for error," end quote. At 7:13 p.m., Jade said, quote, "I've given this some thought. I have an easy solution," end quote. The next day, at 10:52 a.m., Jade took pictures of Thomas Merriman's computer screen with her phone. So she pulled up the photos that he had of her on the computer, and then she took pictures of his screen and the photos on the screen with her phone. And then she deleted the photos of herself from Merriman's computer. And this was the day that Thomas Merriman was discharged from the healthcare facility, and Jade had promised to pick him up. Alan Roach was with Jade before she left to drive to Ensenadas, where Aviara was located, and he had allegedly been present when she'd erased the pictures from Merriman's computer because his cell phone placed him in the location of Thomas Merriman's home at the time that these pictures were deleted. Now, Tom Merriman was discharged at 11:19 a.m., and a nurse who worked there at Aviara, her name was Devin Ward, she would testify that when Jade arrived to pick him up, Thomas Merriman was doing fine. He was alert and aware, his vital signs were normal, he had excellent oxygen saturation, he was breathing evenly, lungs clear, and he was able to communicate clearly. Nurse Devin had given him some Tylenol and a lidocaine patch, but she also sent him away with some of his own medications that he'd arrived with, including, basic stuff like blood pressure medication, but he also had some oxycodone, trazodone, and zolpidem, which is Ambien. Zolpidem is Ambien. It's just the generic version. It's a sleeping pill. So Jade picked Tom Merriman up in her silver 4Runner, and then they headed back to Solana Beach. But first, Jade stopped at a shopping center, which held multiple businesses, such as a store called Dixie Lane, which is a hardware store. There was also a CVS and a Bevmo. Bevmo is a liquor store. And at 11:30 a.m., Jade sent Alan Roach a text message saying, quote, "I just dosed the hell out of him, stopping for whiskey, then stopping at Dixie Lane to stall. Let me know," end quote. Now, after this, Jade entered Bevmo and purchased a large bottle of Jack Daniel's whiskey and a few mini bottles of vodka. Next, she went into Dixie Lane, where she bought a pack of terry cloth towels. I think they're the kind that you use for your car, those kinds of towels. She also bought some zip ties, 2 packages of disposable gloves, spray paint, and a length of red paracord.
After she buys these items at Dixie Lane, what does she do next? She reaches out to the fixer and says, checking in, "I'll call you back later. I'm driving. I can't hear. I'm in a loud truck. No need for your friend. I do need help getting him home. I'm not strong enough. Please call when you can." Because there's a plan. She's checking in. She needs help. He says at 12:35, "Okay, can I call you in 15 minutes? And she says, "I can't carry him either back in my car or to his house. I'm not strong enough. Can you come right now?" Question mark, exclamation. What happened was Tom had fallen out of the car and hurt himself. He was so heavily medicated, and the drugs that she dosed him with hit him so hard that he couldn't even make it out of the car, and he fell and hurt himself. And she couldn't pick him up. He was too heavy. So because Mr. Roach, the fixer, didn't respond in time, she reached out to another friend, someone she knows that she could trust, a person named Adam Siblak, and she says, 911, call me. Adam Siblak at this time was getting a burrito, didn't hear the text message or feel it, and it was only a little bit later he saw it, and he said, "Oh, I'm sorry." He called her, "I'm getting a tattoo all day. Tattoos tend to take several hours. I can't help you." And he texts back, "I'm sorry, I can't help you." But there was a phone call before that where he explained, "I'm sorry, I can't help you."
Okay, so we have to talk about Adam Sipliak now and who he is or was to Jade Janks. He was a 49-year-old man who had previously dated and been intimate with Jade, and they'd reconnected after Adam's current relationship had ended because he'd reached out to Jade hoping that they could reunite, in like a sexual way. Like he wanted to get with her again. In December, a month before Thomas Merriman's murder, Jade and Adam had gone to Mexico together. they were becoming close again. They were becoming friends again. And Adam said that they didn't have sex when they were in Mexico, but it wasn't for lack of him trying. Now, Jade actually texted Adam Sipliak for help on December 31st. She didn't exactly say what that help was. She was just like, I need you, like 911, can you come over? And Adam was like, no, I'm busy at this moment. And then he texted her later saying he was getting a tattoo and the tattoo was going to take hours and he couldn't help her at that moment. But he suggested that she call their mutual friend, Charles Greery. And so Jade called Charles at 12:46 p.m. telling him that her stepfather was not doing well. And she had picked him up from this healthcare facility, but he was like heavily drugged and he couldn't really stand up alone. And so she needed help getting Thomas Merriman into his house and into bed. But Charles also said, I'm sorry, I can't help you right now because I'm in the desert. They never really elaborate on that, but he was in the desert. So basically, Jade picks Thomas Merriman up from Aviara. She goes to this shopping facility. She texts Alan Roach and she's like, I just dosed the hell out of him and now I'm going to go buy some alcohol and then I'm going to like buy some time going into this hardware store. And then she brings Thomas Merriman home. She pulls into his driveway and now she's desperately calling anyone who can help her lift this man and get him inside of his house where no one can see him. But everyone is tied up. Everyone's busy. Adam Sipliak's busy. Charles is busy. At some point, Alan Roach stopped responding to Jade's text messages, right? So she says, I'm going into the store to kill time. I dosed the hell out of him. Let me know. Basically, like, let me know when you're going to be able to be there. And he doesn't respond. And so then she starts freaking out and she's texting people that she thinks can help her, but nobody can. What the prosecution believes happened is that Jade picked Thomas Merriman up, she went to that shopping center, and then she gave him a bunch of drugs, which is why she told Alan Roach she dosed the hell out of him. And then she went into the shopping center and started shopping to give the drugs time to work, so he would be completely out of it. And then by the time they got home, Thomas Merriman was completely out of it from the amount of drugs Jade had given him. He was unable to walk into his house. And when she tried to get him out of the car, Thomas Merriman fell on the driveway. And we know this because Jade says it happened, and also a neighbor that we're going to talk about in a minute saw Thomas Merriman in bad shape in the driveway at this point. And later we're going to find out that the medical examiner determined that Thomas Merriman's death was due to acute zolpidem intoxication. Remember, zolpidem is Ambien. It's a sleeping medication. The San Diego County forensic pathologist Greg Pizarro would testify, quote, it was a level far beyond therapeutic levels that you would give for a sleep aid, end quote. And Pizarro said that the levels in Merriman's blood were at 0.39 milligrams per liter, and this fell into the range of a toxic dose. Not a lethal dose, but a toxic dose. And police would find the package of zolpidem, and this package did not have Tom Merriman's DNA on it, but it did have Jade Janks' DNA on it. So it sounds like at this point, things couldn't possibly get worse for Jade, right? Because she's got this guy that she's completely like drugged the hell out of. She wants to make it look like he overdosed, but he's got to like be in his bed and stuff for that. And she can't lift him. You know, she can't lift him and get him into the house, and nobody's answering. And Alan Roach, who's the fixer, he's supposed to be helping her, he's MIA. And Jade's probably thinking, this couldn't get worse. But it did get worse, because as Jade is panicking and calling people and trying to figure out what to do, George Hamilton, one of Tom's neighbors, strolled up. George looked at Tom lying in the driveway, and he was like, hey, Tom looks really bad. And Jade told George, don't worry, he just got back from the hospital. He's been really sick. He's been falling a lot. He's been heavily medicated. Like, it's going to be fine. I'm taking care of him. Now, George then spoke directly to Tom, addressed Tom directly. And he's like, Tom, are you okay? And he said Tom started sort of talking, but because he was all drugged up, George couldn't understand anything Tom was saying. And it seems like it was at this time that Jade started keeping track of the circumstances that were happening in her Apple Notes app. And one of these notes was time-stamped with the name George Hamilton after it. So basically, this is Jade saying, George Hamilton saw us at this time, saw me and Tom Merriman in the driveway. Tom's out of it. He saw us at this time. And the prosecution believes that Jade was keeping track of the timeline of that day, who she saw, who came over, who saw Tom, specifically so she would remember, so that when the police talked to her, she would be able to accurately, recall these events and who saw her, and she wouldn't be blindsided, and she'd be able to sort of construct an alibi and an excuse, a justification around this timeline. And then after George Hamilton is like, okay, I guess you've got this, and he leaves, Jade sends a flurry of texts to anyone and everyone because she's getting desperate. At 12:46 p.m., Jade texted her friend, Sarah Jacobs, saying, quote, "He is alive. Please don't ask me any questions. Just help me get him into the house." End quote. At 12:57 p.m., Jade texted Alan Roach again, saying, quote, "I had to call someone to help me carry him inside. I wish you were closer." End quote. At 1 p.m., Sarah Jacobs and her boyfriend Justin came over, and Jade told Justin, like, "Oh, my stepfather, he's really not doing well. Can you just help me get him back into my car? Because I'm going to bring him back to the hospital." Justin did this, helped get Tom into the car, Jade's car, and then he and Sarah watched Jade drive away with Thomas Merriman in the passenger seat. At 2:38 p.m., Jade texted Alan Roach, saying, quote, "He's waking up. I really didn't want to be the one to do this." End quote. Alan responded and said that he personally could not come and help her at this moment. He was tied up, but he would send his partner, a man named Brian Solomons. Jade responded and said, "Listen, I'm not super comfortable having another person involved," even though she's been calling everyone and their mother, but okay, whatever. And Jade was basically like, "Let me just see what I can do. Like, don't send anyone yet." At 2:49 p.m., Jade texted Alan Roach, quote, "It's pretty much done. I don't need to talk to anyone." End quote. And 2 minutes later, she texted Alan Roach again, saying, quote, "How soon will you get here? It's going to be weekend at Bernie's." End quote. At 2:57 p.m., Alan Roach responded, once again, that he was just going to send his partner Brian, saying, quote, "Just throw him a bill and I will give him a bill. I still have the money you gave me earlier, but I won't be seeing him." End quote. At 2:59 p.m., Jade texted Alan Roach saying, quote, "He's waking up. I'm not sure how much longer I can control my temper." End quote. Now, apparently, there's no response from Alan Roach. He goes dark again. And Jade really was losing her temper because at 3:14 p.m., she texted Alan saying, quote, "I asked you for help. I tried to do it on my own. I need your help, and I'm waiting on a stranger." End quote. Enter Brian Solomon, who's Alan Roach's partner. And Brian Solomon was seen at 3:17 p.m. on surveillance at CVS buying gloves, like disposable gloves. He had his girlfriend, Maria Bravo, drop him off at Jade's house around 3:30 p.m. And Maria would later testify that 20 minutes later, Brian called her and was like, "Get your ass back here right now. Like, come back and get me. Right now, turn around. I don't care where you are. I don't care where you're going. Turn around. Come back and get me." And Maria claims that when Brian got back into her car, he was freaked out. He told her that he had gone to Jade's and he basically said to Jade, "Okay, what do you need me to do?" Because Brian's thinking she just needs him to like help her carry her stepfather in. Allegedly, that's what Brian claims. He did not know he was there to help kill anybody. And Brian would testify that Jade responded, quote, "I want you to strangle him and I'll take care of the rest." End quote. So Brian excused himself to make a quick phone call, which was to Maria. He ran down to the end of the driveway and then he ran until he saw Maria's car, as he should have, which I would too, that shit's crazy. Now, Jade received a text message from Alan Roach at 3:41 p.m. and it said, quote, "I ordered him to leave. I didn't want him involved like that." End quote. And he's talking about Brian Solomon. But later, Brian would explain to a jury how that wasn't exactly how things had gone down. He had met Alan Roach through boxing. They both worked personal security. And when Roach called him on December 31st, Brian claims all he was instructed to do was to go to the store, buy gloves, and then go see Jade Janks. When he got there, he said Jade was standing by her car, and he said her demeanor was off. She asked him to come inside her house, and as he stood by the front entrance, he spotted a handgun on the counter. Jade told him that she'd drugged Thomas Merriman and that he was in the back seat of her car. And at this point, Brian's a little confused because, like I said, He claims he believed he was just there to help this woman get her stepfather into the house. He thought he was doing a good deed. Those are his words, not mine. He said, I thought I was doing a good deed. Thought I was being a good person. Why would you need gloves, Brian? Why would you need gloves? But still not sure what was going on, allegedly. Brian asked Jade, do you want me to get your stepfather into the house? And she said, yeah. And then she mentioned to Brian that she'd put a pillowcase or a bag or something over Thomas Merriman's head. And I guess Brian just didn't acknowledge that she said this. And then Brian asked Jade, well, do you want me to carry Tom in? And he said that she responded, quote, I have a rope around him, end quote. Brian then asked again, do you want me to bring him inside? And that's when Jade said to him, no, I want you to strangle him and then bring him inside. I'll take care of the rest. That's when Brian excused himself. He was like, hey, I've got to call Alan Roach. But in reality, he said he was scared. He ran down the driveway, called his girlfriend Maria to come back and get him. And once he was in the car with Maria, Brian called Alan Roach and he was like, I'm not doing this, man. I'm out. Okay, I'm out. I didn't know I was here to strangle some dude. I thought I was just here to be a fixer and a cleaner. I mean, he thought he was there to do a good deed. Just so you know, Alan Roach and Brian Solomons have not been charged with any crimes. They are innocent as far as the law is concerned. And I'll leave it at that for now. But keep in mind, Brian Solomons never called the police. And even when he found out through social media that Thomas Merriman was dead, he still did not notify law enforcement. In fact, even when Brian was talked to by the police on January 7th, after Thomas Merriman's death and after Tom was found dead, Brian still withheld the information that Jade had asked him to strangle Tom. And it wasn't until 18 months later, basically on the eve of Jade's trial, that he finally revealed what had allegedly actually happened. Now, Jade's defense team is going to use this long delay to paint Brian as a liar, but Brian said it was basically just because he was afraid to call the police because he had a record, a criminal record, and he didn't want to really involve or incriminate himself. And especially when he found out that Thomas Merriman was dead, that was when he was like, oh, hell no, because no one's going to believe me that I wasn't there to actually help kill this person. No one's going to believe me that I didn't actually help kill this person. So I'm just going to leave it as it is, which I suppose is somewhat believable. I just don't know how believable it is that you went there thinking you were only supposed to be a good Samaritan and do a good deed and help a man get into bed. I don't know. That's just my opinion. Allegedly, don't come for me. What do you guys think? So Jade's fixer, friend, personal security guard while she's showering, Alan Roach, he's MIA. He's unavailable. Brian Solomons comes over. He freaks out. He runs away. And now Jade's really at the end of her rope. And at 4:06 p.m., she texted her friend Adam Sipolak again, asking if he was done getting his tattoo, to which he responded, no. Jade started to send a bunch of texts to Alan Roach starting at 4:08 p.m., where she said, quote, fuck, he is up. I guess I'm on my own. End quote. At 4:12, she told Alan, quote, by the way, he is waking up and getting way more aggressive. End quote. At 4:28 p.m., she texted Alan Roach, quote, he is super medicated. I can't keep a kicking body in my truck. I'm about ready to club him. End quote. She must have really meant that she was ready to club him and losing her patience because she repeated the same sentiment at 4:30. He's waking up. I'm about ready to club him, verbatim. She said that again. And then at 4:32 p.m., Jade told Alan Roach, quote, I asked you for your help. I can't do it alone, end quote. At 4:35 p.m., she told Alan that Thomas Merriman was very aware. He was waking up, he was aware of what was going on, and she was on her own. And then at 5:01 p.m., she texted Alan to ask him why he wasn't responding, because it appears that Alan Roach ghosted Jade for almost 2 hours. He did not respond to her text between 3:55 p.m. and 6:03 p.m. And then at 6:03, Alan texted Jade saying he was sorry, he was dealing with some family stuff. Now, during this period of no contact, Jade not only called the jails to see if Alan Roach had been arrested, which the prosecution will later point out means she was worried that he had been apprehended by police, that the police figured out what he and Jade were up to and they'd already taken Alan Roach into custody. But she also sent a text to Thomas Merriman's phone. The text said, checking in on you. How you feeling? Now, the prosecution would later point to this message, and they would claim that it showed Jade knew what was happening, that Tom was going to die, or he was already dead, and she was trying to cover her tracks to make it seem as if she knew nothing, as if she was not with him, as if she wasn't involved. even though he's in her car still. Now, when Alan Roach finally texted back, Jade was like, oh, thank God, can you come over and help me now? And at 6:16 p.m., Alan texted her saying, quote, I have a better idea, but it can't be taken care of tonight. Can't afford a messy job site, end quote. Now remember, Jade's going to say the plan was just to have an intervention with Thomas Merriman. Her and Alan were going to confront him about the pictures, make him erase them, and tell him to move. What about that would be a messy job site? What about that would be something you couldn't take care of tonight? And it would be a messy job site. And why would you want Thomas Merriman drugged out of his mind at the time that you actually confront him about this horrendous boundary violation that he committed against you? Just doesn't make any sense. It's not adding up. It was not until 7:30 p.m. that night that someone showed up to help Jade. And this someone was good old Adam Sipliak. Jade had texted him earlier saying her stepfather was passed out drunk in her driveway and she needed help getting him inside. So that is what Adam claimed he expected when he pulled up that night. What you don't know yet is that in the end, it was Adam Sipliak who would turn Jade into the police. And he would tell them that when he arrived at her house, she told him about the photos that Thomas Merriman had on his computer. And then, according to Adam Sipliak, Jade said, quote, it's even gnarlier than that. I killed him. He's in the back of my 4Runner, end quote. Adam claims that Jade confessed to drugging Thomas Merriman, suffocating him with a bag, and choking him. He says that Jade asked him if he could help her get Merriman into his bed, but then Adam was like, oh, hell no. This is not something I want to be involved in. And so he left. He got out of there, but not before wiping his prints off of anything he had touched, and not before sharing a cigarette and a goodnight kiss with Jade. Now, according to Adam, he and Jade had been intimate before. They stopped speaking because Adam's girlfriend was threatened by Jade, but then he and his girlfriend broke up, and he reached back out to Jade, hoping to stoke the flames of passion between them again. And when they'd gone on their trip to Mexico, Adam had tried to have sex with Jade, but she turned him down. So when she texted him out of the blue on December 31st, asking if she could trust him and asking for his help, he sort of thought it was like a guise to get him over to her place, and he was hoping he would get lucky. But then he realized that he was kind of walking into like an active crime scene and he wanted to leave. And he said that he didn't call the police that night because he was like really struggling with it, but then he didn't sleep all night and he had a guilty conscience, and so he called them the next morning. At 8:12 p.m. on December 31st, Jade texted Alan Roach again saying, quote, can you let me know if I'm alone? Now I have hours till bruising shows. Need to get inside. This does not end well for me, end quote. Well, at least she was cognizant enough to realize that. I mean, it took hours for her to realize that this was not going to end well for her, but she figured it out. At 9:24 p.m., Jade texted Alan Roach one last time that day, telling him that she was going to bed and she still needed to figure out her issue. Now, we can assume from the evidence that Jade was never able to get Thomas Merriman inside his house and into his bed because he would be found 2 days later under a pile of trash and boxes in his driveway. But that doesn't mean that the following morning, Jade wasn't still trying to get him inside. She wasn't still trying to stage the scene of her murder or of his murder that she committed to look like an accidental overdose. On the morning of January 1st, Adam Sipliak, after sleeping on it or not sleeping on it, he called the police at 9:30 a.m. And he basically told them, listen, I think my friend Jade killed her stepfather. He said he didn't know how it had happened and he hadn't seen Tom Merriman alive or dead, but his old friend Jade Janks had asked him for help moving the body. At 9:59 a.m., Jade texted her friend Sarah again, who honestly, if you think about it, Sarah's been the only one to come through for Jade at this point. The only reason Adam came over was because he was hoping he was going to get laid. Sarah's the only real friend here. And Sarah was the one who initially told Jade, like, tell the landlord, call the police, And then she's helping Jade whenever Jade calls. And Jade says to Sarah, listen, I need a favor. I need you and your boyfriend Justin to come over and help me again. But Sarah and Justin were not available to help that day. They finally put their foot down. They were like, you can't pour from an empty cup, Jade. Okay? You've taken a lot. You haven't given anything. What the hell? So once again, when Sarah turned her down, Jade turned to her bodyguard / fixer, Alan Roach. At 3:49 p.m., Jade texted Alan Roach, quote, "I just need to get him inside. Plan B does not end well for me," end quote. Plan A was never going to end well for you, Jade. I don't know what Plan A was. I don't know exactly what Plan B was, but none of these plans you're coming up with were any good. Like, there was no chance that this situation was ever going to end well for you. At 4:52 p.m., Jade texted Alan Roach after she talked to Thomas Merriman's brother, Terrence, because by that point, the police had been called by Adam Sipliak. They were looking for Thomas Merriman, and they were calling Thomas's friends and family trying to see if anyone had, heard from Tom. So a police officer called Terrence, and he was like, "Hey, your brother's missing. We can't find him. Do you know where he is?" And Terrence would later testify that he called his brother Tom's phone, his cell phone, but no one answered. This happened at 4:41 p.m. Terrence called Thomas Merriman at 4:41 p.m., and Terrence received a call back from Tom's cell phone at 4:50 p.m., but it wasn't his brother's voice he heard on the other end of the line. It was Jade Janks' voice. Terrence said, quote, "I wanted to talk to my brother, and she said he wasn't available. She said he was unavailable and sleeping, that he was suffering from Xanax and alcohol withdrawal," end quote. So Jade is, at this point, knowing Thomas Merriman is dead, trying to make people believe that he's still alive, even though Terrence told her that the police couldn't find Thomas Merriman and that no one had heard from him in days, which is not a great alibi. How do you know he's sleeping? That means you were the last person to see him alive, dude. Come on, man. So 2 minutes later, after talking to Terrence, Jade texted Alan Roach, telling him about her conversation with Terrence, telling him that Terrence had just spoken to a detective. No one could find Tom. At 5:07 p.m., Jade texted Alan Roach saying, quote, "I really need to clear the trash in the driveway," end quote. She followed this up with another text at 5:12 p.m. saying, quote, "If anyone knows, the place would be swarming. I have a pile of trash I need to get rid of. Can you send someone?" End quote. 8 minutes later, Jade texted Alan Roach again, reiterating her need to clear the pile of trash from the driveway. Now, Tom Merriman's neighbor, George Hamilton, saw Jade that day. Remember, George is the one who saw them the day before after Jade brought Thomas Merriman home from the hospital, and Thomas fell out of the car, and George was like, "Damn, Tom doesn't look good." And Jade was like, "Everything's fine." George Hamilton saw Jade again that day, January 1st. He saw her standing by a pile of boxes and trash in Tom's driveway. And a little while after this, Jade knocked on his door. And George Hamilton said, quote, "She told me she made a mess in the driveway with the cartons and boxes and that they would clean it up later. I wasn't too concerned about it," end quote. And then at 5:33 p.m., Jade sent Alan Roach one final text. And the text said, quote, "Lose my number. I'm getting pulled over," end quote. So here's what happened. The San Diego County Sheriff's Office was sent to Thomas Merriman's address to do a welfare check, and Detective Alexander Martinez arrived around 4:40 p.m. on January 1st, which is honestly crazy to me because Adam Sipliak called 911 at 9:30 a.m., and he literally said he thought his friend had killed her stepfather. I know it's New Year's Day. Maybe you're a little hungover, but damn, that's some kind of slow-ass response time. Someone calls you and is like, "I think my friend killed her stepfather." And you're like, "We'll get to it in 8 hours, 7-8 hours. Yeah, if he's dead, he's going to still be dead then, right?" What? So from around 4:45 p.m. until 6 p.m., 4 detectives searched Tom Merriman's house. Well, they didn't really search his house at first. They knocked on the door. They walked around. It's a welfare check. They can't just go in. Tom was nowhere to be found, and this led Detective Martinez to go and get a search warrant for the home and vehicle of Thomas Merriman and Jade Janks. Since remember, Jade was the one that Adam Sipliak claimed was responsible for Merriman's death. The police couldn't find Thomas Merriman. Now they're like, okay, we got to check Thomas's house. We got to check Jade's house. We got to find this dude. Right around 5:30 p.m., detectives spotted Jade pulling out of her driveway in her SUV. So they pulled her over. They brought her to the police station where she was questioned about Tom's whereabouts. Jade said that she hadn't seen Tom that day, but he had just been released from the hospital the previous day, and she'd picked him up and brought him home. She didn't know where he was now. At 9:01 p.m. that night, Jade said she thought she might need to speak to an attorney. And at 4:30 a.m. the next morning, which was January 2nd, Jade was released to her father as the police had yet to find Thomas Merriman's body or any evidence of foul play, even though they had walked by the pile of trash and boxes in his driveway like more than once, more than once. A bunch of times, a bunch of police officers walked right by Thomas Merriman's body in his driveway. Because, by the time they were getting there, it was like getting dark. It was later. I don't know why you didn't go when you first got the 911 call, but whatever. You do you. I can't tell people how to do their jobs. And later, Detective Martinez would be asked about this. Like, did you not notice the pile of trash in the driveway? And he said, quote, "A pile of trash the week after Christmas didn't seem that awkward," end quote. Which, fair enough, totally. I totally agree. But, you'd still think, after you can't find him in his house, after you can't find him in Jade's house, Jade don't know where he is, maybe you might be there's some evidence in here. Maybe we'll find some evidence in this pile of trash. Maybe receipts for plane tickets or, a murder weapon or something. Something might be in this pile of trash, right? Something. Additionally, the police hadn't secured the search warrant for Tom and Jade's homes until just after midnight on January 2nd, and they had decided to wait until the morning light to search the exterior of Tom's house and Jade's house because it was dark. So at 7 a.m. on January 2nd, detectives were back at Thomas Merriman's house, and this was when Detective Rosa Patrone decided to take a closer look at the pile of garbage and boxes in the driveway, and this led her to realize that Thomas Merriman's body was underneath all of that, wrapped in a blanket. At 7:15 a.m., Jade Janks was arrested, and she was charged with first-degree murder. If convicted of this charge, she would face a mandatory sentence of 25 years to life. Photos of Thomas Merriman at the scene show him lying on his side in pajama bottoms and a red t-shirt, still wearing his hospital bracelet. San Diego County forensic pathologist Greg Pizarro would testify that based on the skin discoloration, Tom had been dead between 12 to 15 hours. During the trial, two completely different narratives would be presented. Jade and her defense team would claim that Merriman's death had been a complete and tragic accident, that he'd taken too many pills, and he died in Jade's car, and she'd panicked, not knowing what to do. According to Jade, when she'd picked Tom Merriman up from the Aviara healthcare facility, he was in a nasty mood. He was just complaining. He said that the place was a shithole. He hadn't gotten a wink of sleep the entire time he'd been there. And when Jade started the car, she said Tom grabbed her pill holder from the center console and he took a gabapentin. Tom then asked Jade to stop and buy him whiskey and pick up his prescriptions from CVS. So she went, she bought the alcohol, and then she went into CVS where she was told there was no prescriptions waiting for Thomas Merriman. When she got back into the car and informed Thomas Merriman of the fact that he had no prescription, Jade claims that Tom started to freak out. He demanded to know, well, what am I going to do? How am I supposed to sleep? As we had discussed before, Jade claimed the plan that she and Alan Roach were always continually discussing over text message was just to bring Tom home, confront him about the pictures, make him move so that he didn't live next door to her. But she was trying to reach Alan to make sure everything was in place and ready to execute this intervention of sorts. And since he wasn't answering, she went into Dixieline to buy more time, which is why she had told him she was stalling for time, right? That is how Jade explains the text message during her trial. She was just stalling for time. And Jade claimed that she was working on an outdoor painting project, which is why she'd purchased the terry towels, the red rope, the spray paint, and zip ties. And the zip ties were intended to hold down her tarp that she was going to put under her project. Once she was back in the car, she still hadn't heard from Alan Roach, Jade decided to just drive home. When she parked, Jade said she opened the door for Tom and she placed his walker in front of him, but he only made it a few steps before falling to the ground. Since Tom was too heavy for her to lift, Jade said she knotted together 3 of the terry towels and sort of made a rope that she could use to pick him up. And she says at first this worked. She was sort of able to hoist him off the ground with this makeshift rope. But then Tom fell down again right after she got him on his feet. And when she couldn't get him up again, she called her friend Sarah, who arrived with her boyfriend Justin. Justin got Tom back into Jade's SUV in the back seat this time. And at this point, Jade was worried because Tom was falling and falling. He was weak, out of it, mumbling, not making any sense, incoherent. So she thought it was a good idea to bring him back to Aviara, the healthcare facility he had just been discharged from, and get him some help. But she says when she arrived, they wouldn't let Tom back in the building because of COVID protocols. And Jade was told that the head nurse would call her when she had a moment. but no one ever called her. Now, leaving Aviara, Jade said she felt a sense of fear building. And when she got back home, she finally heard from Alan Roach, who said he was sending his friend Brian to help. And Jade claims that she didn't tell Brian, like, oh, I need you to kill my stepfather. She said, quote, "This is my stepfather. He's had a fall. I just need you to help. Can you carry him nicely inside the house?" End quote. Jade said she did not tell Brian that she needed his help killing Tom. She did not tell Brian that she had killed Tom. She did not tell Adam Sipliak that she'd killed Tom. She did not conspire with Brian, Alan Roach, or anyone else to end her stepfather's life. In fact, she said it was hard to describe how she was feeling in that moment because she cared about Tom, but at the same time, he was so vile, and she was repulsed by him. And as the day went on, she felt more and more afraid and helpless. Now, Jade did admit having Adam Sipliak come over, but once again, she claimed it was just so he could help her get Tom inside. And when Adam found out what she wanted, he became angry. He yelled at her and said that Tom was going to die because he'd overdosed, and he accused Jade of bringing him to a crime scene and setting him up. When she could find no one to help, Jade decided to leave Tom in the backseat of her car overnight as she went inside her own house to go to bed and go to sleep. Now, let's be real here, right? Let's be real here for a minute. Because I have to be, I can't help it. Jade could have asked for help from numerous people. There's neighbors all over that place. Neighbors in every single house on that street. George Hamilton being one of them. And George Hamilton saw her and saw Tom on the day that Jade was calling everyone trying to get Tom into the house. And if Jade felt that George Hamilton, being a man in his 60s, would be unable to do that, then George's younger son was also present at that time. He was at George's house. She could have called the police. She could have called the fire department so they could help her get Tom Merriman into bed. You can call the fire department and have them help you put a car seat into your car. Why can't you call them and say, hey, my stepfather is sick. He needs to be in bed. It gets cold in California at night in January. It might not be safe for a man in Tom's condition with his liver issues, his heart issues, his health issues to sleep outside in a car all night. I need help getting him inside. The police, the fire department, anybody would have helped her do that. Jade could have called her own biological father, who lived in Solana. He didn't live far away. She could have enlisted his help. She did none of this. All right, so for anybody who feels bad for Jade, I feel bad for her too. That sucks. Your stepfather had naked pictures of you, and that's horrible. I would definitely have kicked his ass, but let's be serious here. She called no one for help that she could have called for help. Instead, Jade claimed she went inside, went to bed. When she got up the next morning and checked on Tom, she found him in exactly the same position he'd been in the night before. And when she touched Tom, she said she pulled at his leg. She found it cold. She began to panic. When asked why she hadn't called the police then, at that point, when she thought Thomas Merriman was dead, Jade said, quote, "I was scared. I didn't want to get blamed. I was the one who had picked him up. I had destroyed his computer. I didn't want to be blamed for killing him." End quote. At that moment, Jade claimed her only thought was to hide Thomas Merriman's body so that the neighbors wouldn't see and she could figure out what to do. So she got a wheelchair. She managed to put Tom's body into the wheelchair, or she managed to sort of get him out of the car enough where she could put him into the wheelchair, but then she missed the wheelchair and Tom once again fell and hit the driveway hard again. The wheelchair is also going to raise a lot of questions because where the hell did Jade get a wheelchair from? She didn't just have one lying around. Well, what happened is Jade had gone to Scripps Hospital on January 1st while Tom Merriman was still in her car, dead in her car. And she had asked them for a wheelchair and they gave it to her. But this raises the question. You went to the hospital. You said, my stepfather's not able to move. I need to get him out and into bed. Can I borrow a wheelchair? Why didn't you ask anyone at the hospital for help? Why didn't you ask someone, doctors, nurses, people who come in clutch during a medical emergency? Why didn't you ask them for help? All right, so she tries to get him in the wheelchair. He falls, hits the pavement, and this is when Jade realized that it was going to be impossible to get him off the driveway and back into the wheelchair. And Jade figured that the best thing she could do at that moment was just to stack piles of boxes and garbage. on top of her stepfather's body. Jade claimed she panicked. She had no idea what to do. She had no plan, even though she's full of plans in the days prior, right? Plan A, plan B, none of them end well for you, bitch. But this one, you have no plan now for what to do. And finally, later that day, Jade decided to get into her car and go get herself a criminal defense attorney, which is when she was pulled over by the police and brought in for questioning. Now, when Jade was cross-examined by the prosecutor, George Del Portillo, she was asked about the text message that she had sent to Alan Roach. "I just dosed the hell out of him," right? That's what she sent to Alan Roach, referring to her stepfather. And Del Portillo was like, well, what did you mean by that? Like, it sounds like you drugged him. It sounds like you're trying to kill him. And Jade was like, well, I suppose that was bad phrasing. Del Portillo next asked Jade about her Weekend at Bernie's reference, for which she really didn't have an explanation for. And for anyone who doesn't know, Weekend at Bernie's is a dark comedy. I think it was 1989, 1990. It starred Pauly Shore as a hitman who kills a man named Bernie by injecting him with heroin in an attempt to make Bernie's death look like an accidental overdose. And then two of Bernie's employees discover his body, but then they're afraid of being blamed for the murder, so they put sunglasses on him and they push him around in a wheelchair pretending he's still alive while they track down the true killer. It's like almost exactly what happened, except I really don't think that Jade was afraid of being blamed for the murder. She wasn't tracking down the real killer. I think Jade was trying to buy herself time and trying to figure out how she could cover this up and how she could still make Thomas Merriman's death look like an accidental overdose. After hours and hours and hours of him being outside in her car and in the driveway where people saw him. Now, through tears, Jade would tell the jury, quote, "I wasn't planning to leave him there. I didn't really know what to do. I wasn't trying to dump his body," end quote. And Jade's attorney, Mark Carlos, he would tell the jury that Tom Merriman was an alcoholic. He was a person who abused prescription drugs, including narcotics, and Tom had just taken too much that day. Tom also had a history of medical problems, such as an enlarged heart, arterial fibrillation, as well as kidney and liver issues, which prevented his body from metabolizing the medications that he took as it normally should have. Carlos said that the photos Jade found on Thomas Merriman's computer, they weren't a motive to kill Thomas Merriman. They were upsetting, and it showed Jade that Merriman had an unhealthy obsession with her, but Jade had been Tom's caretaker for years. She loved him. She would never intentionally hurt him. The prosecution told the jury that Jade had killed Thomas Merriman, and she'd planned it. George Del Portillo put text after text up on the screen for the courtroom to see and walked everyone through his theory about what had happened. Jade picked Tom up, gave him a lethal dose of Zolpidem, which the package of Zolpidem only had her fingerprints on it, not Tom's, and then she left him in her car to go shopping for a murder kit while the drugs kicked in. As I had mentioned previously, the Zolpidem, a sleeping medication, is technically what killed Tom Merriman, but he also had other drugs in his system, though not at such high levels. The toxicology report stated that Tom had also ingested the antidepressant trazodone, the pain medication oxycodone, and gabapentin, which is an anticonvulsant, which is used to treat seizures as well as nerve pain. All of these medications had been prescribed to Thomas Merriman besides the gabapentin, which was Jade's. And it also looks like, because I was looking up these drugs, it looks like trazodone and gabapentin together at the same time can cause some adverse side effects. The combination of these two drugs can cause an increase in dizziness, drowsiness, confusion, and some people, especially older individuals, can experience impairments in their thinking, judgment, and motor coordination. So the prosecution contended that it was Jade's plan all along to drug Thomas Merriman, have Alan Roach help her get Tom into bed, strangle and suffocate him, and then have it look like an accidental overdose. Like, they weren't going to try and actually overdose him. They were going to make him incapacitated so he couldn't fight back, and then strangle and suffocate him, and then basically say, like, we don't know what happened. He just died. What happened? You know, which I guess maybe it would have worked, because the prosecution, they say, like, this would have worked. Like, this probably would have worked given Thomas Merriman's history of alcohol and drug abuse, given the prescriptions he was prescribed, given what levels these prescriptions were found in his system. If Jade had been able to get him inside and into his bed, she probably would have gotten away with this, which is scary. And it's sad when somebody has a problem with drugs and alcohol that it's easier to, like, set it up to make it look like they killed themselves if you were in the business of wanting to murder them. Like, that's very sad, because somebody might look at Tom's past history and be like, yeah, that makes total sense that he overdosed and that he just like took too many pills and died. Now, the defense is going to question this, because remember, the zolpidem is found in Tom Merriman's system, not at lethal levels, at toxic levels. Like, it's way too much, but not enough to like actually kill an average person. And according to the medical examiner, Greg Pizarro, there was no evidence of strangulation, asphyxia, or suffocation on Thomas Merriman's body. Pizarro testified that he had found no petechia hemorrhages, which are often seen in strangulation cases, and he had also performed an anterior neck dissection, basically like pull the skin back of your neck, and Pizarro said he found no fracture to the hyoid bone or injuries to the thyroid cartilage, which are also often seen in strangulation cases. Now, Dr. Stephen Campman also testified. He's a forensic pathologist and the chief medical examiner for San Diego County, so he's technically Pizarro's boss. Campman said that he had not conducted the autopsy, but he'd read and signed off on Pizarro's report. And I want to reference a summary of the trial written by Alita Wan. She's an attorney and a true crime writer who was present for the trial. She has given the most detailed and organized account of what happened during the trial that I could find. She has a website called alitalaw.com. I highly suggest you check it out because she's very thorough, clearly knows what she's talking about. And I'm going to link it in the description box because credit where credit's due. But Alita wrote that Dr. Campman talked about strangulation, testifying that it takes 4 to 4.5 pounds of pressure to close the jugular veins, which are the ones that drain blood from the brain. It takes 11 pounds of pressure to close the carotid artery, which transports blood to the brain. In comparison, Dr. Campman said that it takes 12 pounds of pressure to open a can of soda. So it really doesn't take a lot of pressure to strangle somebody to death, I guess. That's what I'm hearing from this, because I can open a can of soda easy, right? So Dr. Campman explained that injuries associated with strangulation can present as follows: external injuries such as abrasions, scrapes, bruises, small petechial hemorrhages, and internal injuries such as hemorrhages to the muscle layers in the neck, as well as swelling in the throat lining. Campman said that it depended on where the force was applied to the neck, but fatal strangulation could be caused without leaving any of these injuries. In fact, without leaving any signs of strangulation at all. Dr. Campman went on to say that petechial hemorrhaging is not seen in all strangulation cases, especially if there's not enough pressure to cause blood vessels to burst, but based on photographs that he'd seen of the autopsy, he believed he had spotted some petechia on Tom's face to the right of his eye, although he believed that these spots were probably more associated with lividity rather than strangulation, but he couldn't be 100% sure. On cross-examination by the defense, who's going to be Jade's lawyers, both Dr. Campman and Dr. Pizarro admitted that they could not say with any medical certainty that strangulation or asphyxia had occurred in Thomas Merriman's death. And then the defense team also called their own medical witness, Dr. Charles O'Connell, an emergency room doctor and medical toxologist. And this doctor testified that it would take a lot of Ambien to cause an overdose. He said he's personally seen patients take between 30 and 40 pills without dying, which is crazy. That's crazy to me. What? 30 to 40 Ambien? But you got to be like getting your stomach pumped though, right? Like you're an ER doctor, so maybe they took those pills and then they came in to see you and you pumped their stomach. But like if they kept those 30 to 40 pills in their system without getting their stomach pumped, like they probably die, right? This is crazy to me. But Dr. O'Connell also said that when Tom was initially admitted to the hospital at the end of December, his blood alcohol content was 0.256. And this showed that Tom was, an active alcoholic. Tom had alcohol hepatitis. He had liver dysfunction, a pacemaker, an enlarged heart, congestive heart failure, swollen and congested lungs, emphysema from prolonged smoking, a 30 to 40% blockage of his arteries, as well as broken ribs from his recent December 15th fall. During his 9 days at Scripps Memorial, Tom was also treated for Xanax and alcohol withdrawals. Because of Tom's extensive liver damage, Dr. O'Connell said it would take a longer time for the drugs to leave Tom's body, and the FDA suggests reduced Ambien doses in this case. This doctor said that he personally would not even prescribe Ambien to someone with liver dysfunction because the drug is supposed to clear the body within 11 to 16 hours, But if it's taken every day and this person has liver dysfunction, the way Thomas Merriman did, the Ambien can stack up. It can build up. So basically, I think the defense is trying to say you have no proof that Jade strangled Thomas Merriman or suffocated him. The people she confessed to are lying. And Thomas Merriman probably just did accidentally die from an overdose because he was given too much of this Ambien. And, people with liver damage shouldn't have Ambien because this is what can happen. But wasn't it Jade who texted Ellen Roach saying she dosed the hell out of Thomas Merriman? So isn't that still technically her fault, even though she claims Thomas Merriman took all those pills while she was in the store buying his alcohol and checking on his fake prescriptions? That's when she said he took all the medicine. No, she texted Ellen Roach and said, I just dosed the hell out of him. But I want to go back to the whole strangulation thing for a minute because the defense really focused on this. They were trying to show that the people who claimed Jade had confessed to them were lying because they had referred to Jade claiming she'd strangled Merriman and put a bag or a pillowcase over his head, but there was no evidence that pointed to Jade intentionally murdering Thomas Merriman. There's no evidence that she had strangled him or tried to suffocate him. But then criminologist Kelly Ledbetter testified that she had tested bloodstains on pillowcases found in Jade's SUV, as well as portions of Jade's interior seats. And the results showed that there was a very strong likelihood of the blood containing Tom Merriman's DNA. The red paracord was also found in Jade's car, and testing of that showed that the DNA on the inner section of the cord was a match for Thomas Merriman, while the ends of the cord showed a match for Jade Janks. Because you'd hold a cord, I wish I had a cord to show you. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? What is this? This is a cord. This is the red paracord. When you want to strangle somebody or choke somebody, you hold the cord or whatever you're using here. And then their throat would be there. So your hands and your DNA would be on the ends and their DNA would be on the middle. Is that just a coincidence? Is it a coincidence, Jade? And then there were the 3 terry cloth towels that were found tied together in Jade's vehicle. And these towels had DNA on them that matched Thomas Merriman, Jade Janks, and Ellen Roach. Which, listen, does that mean that Ellen Roach was at Thomas Merriman's house after Jade bought the towels? Or is this just a fluke? Maybe he shops at the same store and he had run his hand along them before. I don't know, but it does not look good for anybody involved. After all witnesses had been called, and before closing statements, Jade's lawyer, Mark Carlos, asked the judge if he could have the weekend to discuss lesser charges with his client. But apparently Jade and Carlos were not on the same page about this. Jade did not want to go that route. She wanted to either be found guilty and face 25 years to life, or she wanted to be found not guilty and go free. Really, she just wanted to be found not guilty and go free. And she thought that the jury would be sympathetic enough to her plight and that she had explained everything away enough that that was the likely outcome. She literally felt that that was the likely outcome. In court, Mark Carlos told the judge that even though his client had objected, he still wanted the jury instructed on voluntary and involuntary manslaughter charges. And apparently Jade eventually came around and agreed to the lesser charges option. The judge also agreed that there was a legal basis for voluntary manslaughter under the heat of passion kind of condition, and involuntary manslaughter in reference to Jade giving Tom medication and then leaving him in the car all night. During closing statements, Jade's attorney, Mark Carlos, asserted that there was zero evidence to support murder. There was only evidence that Thomas Merriman took too much medication, died, and Jade panicked. And Mark Carlos said, quote, "Panic is not a crime, and speculation is not evidence." End quote. I mean, is he just going to ignore the DNA evidence on the paracord, on the towels, on the pillowcase, the text messages? Are we just going to act like those didn't happen? In response to Mark Carlos's claims that there was no evidence to suggest a murder happened, the prosecutor, George Del Portillo, listed off 15 pieces of evidence. And like I said, put a lot of focus on the text messages. And he told the jury, quote, "Find her guilty of murder. The evidence proves it. The law requires it. Justice demands it." End quote. Very moving. The jury gathered to deliberate on the morning of December 20th, 2022, and the following morning they returned with a verdict of guilty, not of voluntary or involuntary manslaughter, but guilty of first-degree murder.
Verdict, count 1, first-degree murder. We, the jury, in the above entitled cause, find the defendant, Jade Sasha Janks, guilty of the crime of murder in violation of Penal Code Section 187, subsection A, a felony, as charged in count 1 of the amended information, and fix the degree thereof as murder in the first degree. Dated today's date, signed the foreperson. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, was this and is this your verdict as read?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, does either side wish to have the jury polled?
No, Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
All right, Madam Clerk, would you please poll the jury?
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, please answer with a yes or no, answer only, as to count 1, first-degree murder. Was this and is this your verdict as read? Juror number 1.
Yes.
Number 2.
Yes.
Number 3.
Yes.
Number 4.
Yes.
Number 5.
Yes.
Number 6.
Yes.
Number 7.
Yes.
Number 8.
Yes.
Number 9.
Yes.
Number 10.
Yes.
Number 11.
Yes.
Number 12.
Yes.
Your Honor, I record 12 affirmative responses.
All right, Madam Clerk, please record the verdict.
So recorded, Your Honor.
Counsel, do you waive reading of the verdict as recorded?
I mean, every time I see this clip, I'm blown away because Jade looks absolutely shocked, doesn't she? She looks flabbergasted. I think she genuinely believed that enough members of the jury would feel bad enough for her situation with the whole photo thing to feel that what had happened to Thomas Merriman was justified, or she would cry enough on the witness stand where they would be like, yeah, her story seems, believable, and even if it's not, like, he was a piece of shit, like, he deserved to die. She was hoping that at least 1 or 2 would be of that mindset, and she was wrong, because when they polled the jury, it showed that the jury had voted guilty unanimously. So not one of them considered Merriman's death to be understandable or justifiable, no matter how much of a creep he was. And listen, if all of this is true about the pictures, he was a creep, huge creep. Because obviously there was a dozen other ways Jade could have handled this, right? A dozen other ways. She could have called the police. She could have, had a talk with Merriman, been like, we're done. You're dead to me, okay? You burned the bridge. Find someone else to take care of you. Find someone else to wipe your ass. I can't believe you did this to me. I'll never forgive you for this. I've completely deleted everything on your computer. I hope you burn in hell. Peace. There's a million ways she could have handled this, but she didn't. This is what she chose. And during sentencing, Jade gets even more emotional, but just when people are talking about Thomas Merriman. So when Pat Flanagan, Thomas Merriman's friend and partner in the butterfly thing, started talking about Tom and his love for butterflies, Jade's like nodding, and she's like, he did love those butterflies. He did. I'll let you see for yourself. Play clip.
Therefore, probation will be denied. She will be committed to the Department of Corrections for the term of the rest of her life in prison, with a minimum eligibility of parole date for 25 years from now. So in essence, 25 years to life.
Tom was kind and funny and professional and always found the time to share his knowledge with me about butterflies and the plants needed to make them thrive. Tom provided me with education to select the right type of butterfly, because what I wanted to do was be able to take a butterfly and set it on the finger of one of my patients that was dying and let them understand that they still were connected to nature and they still were someone to look after and care for. Also, Tom, at times, a family would call me in the morning and say, we'd like a butterfly for a ceremony to honor our relative. But this was the last minute and I didn't have any butterflies. So I'd call Tom and I'd get a butterfly.
I mean, if you believe that this is genuine emotion, which I personally do not believe that it is genuine emotion, but that's just my opinion. It's genuine emotion. She feels something. She feels bad that he's dead. Maybe you believe that. Like I said, I don't. I think she's just trying to, she's doing this thing where she's playing this, I'm an innocent little girl and I need help, and I'm a victim and I need people to stand outside my bathroom while I shower, and I need, she's texting Alan Roach oh, I asked you for help and I need you here. I don't want this person here. I almost feel like, listen, This is just speculation. I almost feel like she was like interested in Alan Roach, and she kind of used this like damsel in distress thing to get him like close to her. And then maybe she was like, well, if he helps me with this, like it's Bonnie and Clyde, you know, we're together in this forever. Like, I know you have better things to do than stand and watch me shower every day. You know, it just seemed like there was something else there. She really wanted to be the damsel in distress. She really wanted people to help her. She created a plan to murder somebody and then, you know, set the stage to make it look like an accident without realizing or caring that she could not do this herself. All right, two can keep a secret if one of them is dead. If you cannot personally carry out your own murder and cover up without asking for help, without enlisting several people who are now gonna like turn on you, then you don't do it. You don't do it. But I mean, let's talk about this. Real talk, okay? Do I feel bad for Jade? Absolutely. If she truly looked at Thomas Merriman as a father figure and her trust was violated in that way, it is a terrible thing. I would also feel physically sick. It's a boundary cross that you never come back from. The level of betrayal that Jade must have felt, it must have been intense and painful and just like made her question everything she ever knew about this man. But I do think it was the wrong move for her legal team to argue that she didn't kill Thomas Merriman, because I think the texts speak for themselves, even without all that other evidence to support them. Like, you can argue and say, oh, I didn't mean that, or I meant this, or that was just a figure of speech. But all of those texts put together, one after the other, the way that they were shown during the trial, it's damning. It's damning. He's waking up. I don't know if I can hold my temper anymore. I want to club him. She wasn't saying like, oh my God, I feel so bad, like that I can't get him in the house. Like, what's going to happen? I'm going to ask a neighbor. Like I said, she could have asked a neighbor for help. She could have gone and knocked on a bunch of doors, grabbed 3-4 strong, burly guys and gotten Thomas Merriman into his bed. Why didn't she do that? Because she knew that those people would figure out what was going on with Tom wasn't good, wasn't right, wasn't natural, that he would need help. And if Thomas Merriman died, which was her plan, they would start talking to the police. Her friends aren't going to start talking to the police. At least she assumed they weren't, but Adam Sipliak did. Her friends were not going to turn on her. They weren't going to betray her, but just these random neighbors, no, they might. So that's why she didn't ask for help. Now listen, I truly don't think we know the full story about what was going on between Jade Janks and Thomas Merriman. Because remember, it was at the end of December 2002 where Jade's mother, Jeanette, said she caught her daughter and her husband, so Jade and Thomas Merriman, in a compromising situation. Was there something going on with Jade and Tom, like back then at least, when Tom was a younger man? Was that why they lived together for several years after, kind of raising cash together as like domestic partners? Did something happen and that's why Jade decided to move out on her own? And then, you know, because of her intimate relationship with Tom and because of the way she had once felt about him and because of what he had once meant to her, she returned in 2020 when he really needed help. Maybe were some of those pictures that Thomas Merriman had gotten from Jade herself or had taken of Jade when they were living together, you know, like being together maybe? I don't know. Just speculation. I don't think we're ever going to know what really happened, but I find it hard to believe that finding these pictures would give you a motive enough to kill somebody. I just find it hard to believe. Something else is at play here. Did Thomas Merriman tell somebody? Did he say he was gonna tell somebody? Was he just pursuing her over and over again and she felt like he was becoming dependent on her again and she was like, I won't be able to get away from him this time. Now I live next door to him. There's not enough space. I need this guy out of my life once and for all. I don't want to think about my past. I have my own business now. I have a new life. I've left all that behind me. I don't know. But I think finding the pictures was definitely shocking to her, but just not enough to murder somebody over. You know, it's maybe in like a heat of passion thing, like you found them and then all of a sudden you turn around and Tom Merriman's behind you and he's like, oh, you found them. And then you like freak out and hit him with like a paperweight or something, but not after several days where you're planning and premeditating the murder. Then you've had time to think about it. You've had time to be logical about it and be like, do I want to go to prison for the rest of my life? This was not a young girl. She's an almost 40-year-old woman, okay? Do I want to go to prison for the rest of my life because this creep? You know, is that really what I want? Like, something's going on. Was Jade on his life insurance policy? Did she stand to inherit any money if he died? Those are things that I would like to know. that I didn't hear come out during the trial. But this trial wasn't publicized and there wasn't a ton of information on the specifics. But like, that's what I would be interested in knowing. But yeah, at the end of the day, I will say neither Thomas Merriman or Jade Janks appeared to be like the best of people, right? Neither one of them were saints. And, you know, who's the victim here? Thomas Merriman. He's dead. He can't defend himself and he can't tell you what happened or why. And he was murdered. His ability to tell his side of the story was taken away. He's the victim. That doesn't mean he's not a creep. That doesn't mean he wasn't addicted to alcohol or pills. It doesn't mean that he couldn't be an absolute dick sometimes when he was drunk. It just means that at this point, he's the victim and he's who we need to advocate for. And Jade is, you know, going to be going to prison for 25 years to life. And I think that it's probably justified. I think that it's probably definitely the sentence that she should have gotten. That's what the judge agreed to. That's what the jury thought. I don't think that any objective person could look at this case and be like, I understand why Jade killed her stepfather. Like, I think she was justified in doing so and she shouldn't face any repercussions for that. But let me know what you think in the comment section, because I'm interested to see. You know, I don't mind disagreements. I don't mind other points of view as long as you're respectful to yourself, to others, to me, to the people involved in this case. Because remember, Thomas Merriman did have a family and he has people who miss him very much. Probably his butterflies miss him very much too. So yeah, let me know what you think in the comment section. Don't forget to like this video if you liked it. Share it if you think it's worth sharing. Subscribe if you haven't already. And I will see you back here very soon for another true crime video. Until then, stay kind, stay beautiful, stay safe, and I'll see you very soon. Bye.
Straight down, and that river runs deep, the mountains get steep, and the voices getting too loud. All these feelings I've buried, it's looking like a cemetery. They're coming back from the grave, calling out my name, better say a Hail Mary. Well, you don't know how deep it goes until it's killing you slowly. So you got to let it go. I got blood on the strings, blood on